actually. Debbie was speaking to the reflect and evaluate part of the project and what that looked like at Ponderosa.
Okay, so to continue on from our recycling, that we did learn that we had reduced our waste stream by 75%, and because we've talked before about it's just it's hard to get people to do new things. People are to change the culture at your school. I was lucky working there that I could constantly send out reminders. Make sure you're recycling. I'm walking around, I'm seeing some plastic water bottles in the recycling or in the trash. Not okay. And then, because of the success with that, it did lead us to the district asking us if we wanted to try to do an energy management project, which, we all said we don't even know what that means. And, they just wanted us to try to reduce the energy usage at the school. And so the kids did some research on that to find out how much energy we use. The fact that we were paying $25,000 a month for energy costs from just our school was just mind-blowing. So, the kids did research on, what were the simplest ways to, to reduce energy usage. And the biggest part of it is turning off lights. So we piloted a program. We met with our custodians, with our administrators, and we were able to get the custodians to go around and take out half of the fluorescent light bulbs that were in our school, in the hallways and in the classrooms. It was not mandatory. We did ask teachers to at least try it for a week, and if they really did not like the lighting, that we'd be happy to go back and change it, because we weren't really going to force it on anybody if they were uncomfortable with it. But this is one of the things where you start a project and then you see other things come out of it, because I started to have teachers come to me and say, this is the first time I've ever been able to go home without a headache at the end of every day, and I never thought about the lighting, but it must be the lighting. And some teachers were concerned that because it was darker in the hallways, that we would have more discipline issues. And it actually turned out to be the exact opposite. Some teachers thought if it's not bright, kids are going to, doze off, fall asleep during class and not paying attention because it's dark and it's, and that turned out to not be the case either. The kids were actually paying more attention, were quieter, more attentive, and we didn't have as many discipline problems. So, I've kind of gone off the rails here with this one, but it just, there's just so many, you can start one project, there's so many things that can come from that. And it was everything from being able to do good for the environment, to making teachers more comfortable, to having less discipline problems, to reducing our energy costs. And over the 10 years that I was there, well, probably 8 that we actually worked on the project, and we saved close to $1 million just from our school in energy costs. And that's all it was asking teachers to turn off lights when they leave their classrooms and to turn off their computers rather than put them in sleep mode or power them down. On breaks, we would ask teachers to go through their classrooms and unplug everything: printers, computers, lights. Got rid of all the little refrigerators that everybody thought they had to have their own refrigerator in the classroom, and encouraged them to spend their department money and buy one refrigerator for their department office that everybody could use, as opposed to everybody having their own. So it's a big culture shock, but it just,
one thing leads to the other. And I think that speaks to a couple of things. One, when we're talking about who the stakeholders are, like who makes these decisions, you had someone from the district come to you, and
right.
Your students then started to understand how decisions are made in a much larger system. So that's one.
Right.
And also it speaks to the importance of gathering impact data, or data at all, right? Had you not collected, or the school not collected behavior incidences during this time of transition, no one really would have probably put those two together.
Right.
You know, and then you can kind of reflect and evaluate that with your students.
Right.
I mean, that's powerful stuff.
And I think that evaluating it kind of makes it go full circle back to the picking an issue and the planning and taking you that next step.
And and I would add too that if you are doing any projects within your school, to have administration support is like key to the success. I mean, our principal was just unbelievably supportive of everything that we tried to do. You know, some teachers I'm sure went and complained to him about the lights, and he said the same thing, just give it a chance. If you don't like it, we'll fix it. But and he was great. I mean, he embraced this. I could hear him because I was in the office, and I could hear him every time. He never forgot when he left his office to turn off his lights, even if he was just going to the bathroom. They'll tell you 10 seconds, and it does matter. Everybody thinks fluorescent lights, you can leave them on forever, and it doesn't make any difference. But I could, I'd hear him as he's going down through the office, like yelling at people, like, I don't see anyone in here. How come the lights are on? And I would do the same thing. I'd walk away from my desk and leave my little desk lamp on. I'd come back and it would be off, and I would know that he had been there. So
that's great. That's great. Yeah, those administrators can be your champion. Awesome. Demonstrating and celebrating. This is one of my favorite pieces. As many of you may know, my background is in arts integration specifically. So the arts, for me, were always a really lovely way to share student learning. So it's really, you document your work and it makes the learning visible. So presenting it to diverse audiences allows others to celebrate in your success, right? So when you have these demonstrations and these celebrations, they really help to compile these bodies of evidence, right, to use an academic phrase, with learning objectives, reports, photos, letters, videos. They want to see these, right? They want to see what students have learned. And then submitting these experiences to newspapers and other local media, they want to celebrate people. They want to find the good in our society. They want to share positive things that are happening. So, if we give them the chance to do that, it's amazing what really they might pick up. Educating the community and showcasing work is really important. Inviting others to get involved, taking action on the issue. I'd like to say that this demonstration piece is so huge for families. Like, this is where they're like aha moments, right? And I feel like my time working with the little ones, whenever we showcased something, holy cow, did the parents come out. It was like, for a while I was working in a very divided community, and they didn't always, two sides of our community didn't necessarily agree on a lot of issues. But when those kids were coming together on a project to share their learning, it really unified people and created a sense of solidarity in our school community. And so I think it can be really powerful in terms of community building. And mending and developing relationships. And then one other piece that I want to just also drive the point home, and this is not a solicitation at all, but PeaceJam has a 1 billion acts of peace campaign. No, it's actually a website where you can go and you can log an act of peace. Like, if you help a little old lady across the street, that's valuable and that can be logged. But these projects should absolutely be logged, not only because you can win, project of the year, or perhaps even get an, international project of the year and be able to be invited overseas to Monaco. But those aren't even the only reasons. For me, I keep driving the point home with our high school students. Allow this to be your service learning portfolio. If you've worked on a number of projects and you've logged them, you're basically creating your own page. And when you're applying for, schools or jobs, and you share that link and they want to be like, what have you done? It's not just on a piece of paper resume that you turn in. This really serves your portfolio for project-based learning and service learning. And you can share that link, and I think that that's an incredibly powerful application component.
And I think that demonstrate also allows for further reflection and ideas on how to bring the project further. So if you have experts come in, or whoever it is, different people who weren't involved, they can give you some good feedback, or give the kids some good feedback that then in turn gives them another idea of how to further the project. So it almost then brings you back to that reflect piece, and can give some really great ideas on how to bring that project further.
Great point. And these demonstrations, I think also there are a lot of elected officials who really like opportunities to be in the spotlight with various communities. I know my time out in Montbello, we had Senator Mike Johnston come, and he actually spoke to the kids and congratulated them on a project that they had done. And it was great for him. It was great for his campaign. It was wonderful for the students to make a connection to the larger, government, if you will, in their tiny little project that they thought was inconsequential. So you'd be surprised if you call your elected officials, I think, very often you can get them to come out, especially on election years. Yeah, okay. So now I'm hoping that we can take a few minutes. We're going to watch a video of a particular project. It's a PeaceJam project from a few years back. There are award winners. And then we're going to evaluate them based on our service learning checklist, which we'll share with you in a moment. This checklist was basically our resource for scoring or evaluating projects at our conference last year. I would like to say that we are using this again at the PeaceJam conference in March this year. So educators working with young people, please start with this checklist and use it as a guide as you create your projects. So this is that service learning checklist. Your project should meet a real need, and there's different evidence, if you will. Ultimately, last year we did a trifold board where students presented their projects, and each panel was a different section. So addressing a real need was one, a clear plan of action, effective, was this an effective project? And then real impact. Now, we should say that we know a lot of student groups are going to arrive with incomplete projects because perhaps maybe you've just gotten started, maybe you've just onboarded with PeaceJam and you're not complete. That's totally okay. We want to see what your plans are, what your, how did you assess the community, etc. So all levels of project development are welcomed. Great, so we'll use that as we now watch this semi-brief video of what I believe to be a pretty exceptional project.
Mountview High School is a centralized high school for all of Waldo County's 11 rural towns. Waldo County is considered one of the most economically depressed areas in the state, with almost 40% of children living at or below the federal poverty level. In the 2009-2010 school year, 80% of students qualified for the free or reduced lunch program.
Our focus was to help our friends and neighbors learn how to grow their own food. We started with a humble organic garden whose harvest was designed to supplement 2 local food pantries that served hundreds of families throughout our region. Realizing the abundance of our harvest, we donated our additional produce to our own Mountview School Nutrition.
When we moved into the new school in the fall of 2009, we saw that we had new resources and land available to us. In the spring of 2010, we received the approval for the planning and construction of on-site organic gardens for the school nutrition program. We now manage, grow, and supply fresh organic produce for our school nutrition program, where the gardens are now fully self-sustaining. Our gardens now involve Our efforts have raised the awareness of organic gardening and its impacts on the community.
In 2008, before we moved into the new school, we had seen an opportunity to take our project further by starting a recycling and composting program. It all started with a dumpster dive to determine how much waste we were sending to the landfill from school. We went to work to investigate what could be diverted and salvaged as returnables, recyclables, and compostables. As a result, the sorting system has reduced waste in the cafeteria by over 70% while saving money on waste disposal. In turn, the compost comes back to us as organic fertilizer for our PeaceJam gardens.
Our gardens and composting system have saved the school roughly $2,000 per year. These cost savings for the school nutrition program is from local sources such as beef, poultry, and other veggies, giving us and the school staff healthier choices. We saw an opportunity to make a difference and have an impact on our community's poverty issues, and what we've accomplished was beyond our expectations. We made the choice, took action, and made a difference in our community.
Great. So sorry about the technical difficulties. Nothing is glitch-free these days, but hopefully you were able to just check that video out. And I don't want to take too much time, but I would like to go through this evaluation form, and maybe we can reflect on some of these components. I should say that sometimes we won't know the answers to this. We won't, in some of these videos, for example, we won't actually get to see the research that they did. Although I would argue that this particular group knew their stuff. So can we begin first, maybe our group here, by talking a little bit? Do you feel that this project meets a real need?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've got that high a percentage of kids who are on free and reduced. It definitely addressed that.
Well, and I think they clearly identified with the direction their project went, and they clearly identified the root cause, right? So they didn't just say, people are in poverty, what can we do? They identified the fact that they needed to learn how to grow their own food to make it healthy. So I think they clearly spent, even though we didn't see it, they clearly spent some time on identifying that root cause.
Great point. And one of those ones we can't necessarily see so much, but explored from two or more perspectives. Was difficult to see who their sources were, but I would say that they talked to a lot of people, and they captured a lot of data. So I'd give them a check mark there too. Great. So what about now clear plan of action? Do you think it was pretty well researched? Was it realistic, feasible?
Yeah, I think and it wouldn't be realistic everywhere, but it seemed like they were moving to this new building and they knew they were going to have this space, which then did make it realistic and feasible. So I think yeah, it seemed to be.
And I'd like to add, I know that this particular group did something similar as what you did, Debbie, is it started as a recycling project, and it ended up being a multi-year project. And, beyond building community with those kids, they were so proud of themselves, but one thing just led to the other, and one accomplishment led to another one. So that realistic and feasibility piece, they didn't think huge from the beginning. They thought what's manageable.
And I would give them the check too for having addressing the issue in a creative, innovative, or effective way. I think a lot of groups would say, like, let's have a food drive, which is not as creative or innovative as what they did.
Great. Perfect. So do we agree? We'll give them a check mark. Awesome. So effective. Do you think that this was an effective project? Did we address a real need, root cause? I think, Meg, you spoke to that. Done in collaboration with the community or those affected by the issue? What do we think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. They're working with the local food bank, and then to be able to bring, fresh food into a food bank, I think is amazing, because so often those are all just canned and boxed prepackaged food because, that's really all that's available to them. So, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think they did.
I think they had, they mentioned that they had like courses or classes or, some sort of information session to the community to teach them how to grow their own. So, that's how it started, was about getting people to grow their own, and then it led to the opportunity for them to be able to do it as well.
Right. I think the other thing that stood out to me with the effectiveness is they said how it's now self-sustainable, excuse me. So it's something that clearly is just going to continue year after year. So that, in my mind, said, like, of course it was effective if it's still going.
Right. Yes. And the community's bought into it.
Right.
So I think we could give them, we did clear plan of action, right? Researched, realistic, feasible, so we can give them a check mark there. Awesome. All right. And then real impact. One of the reasons I selected the videos because I thought they did a really good job of demonstrating that impact, right? So they clearly documented everything. They've got photos. They were able to give us data in terms of waste reduction, right? The impacts of service seemed quite measurable. I mean, they very literally had all that trash on a big old scale, right?
That's a big job.
Yeah. Whew. How about the impacts on student learning? What do you think? Okay, it's hard for us to see that right now, right? We don't have that teacher here per se.
Right.
But would you assume, given what we've just seen, that the impact of the students that did this project was significant and able to be measured?
I would think absolutely. I mean, they're out there working in the dirt and planting seeds and seeing where your food actually comes from, which, most kids today don't think their food comes from the grocery store. I mean, they don't have any concept of, preparing ground, planting seeds, watering.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really a lot of work. I'm impressed that they were able to keep this going because, somebody's got to weed, somebody's got to water, somebody has to pick. I mean, it's not something you can just do and then walk away from. I mean, that's an ongoing.
Yeah. And the science behind it,
right,
I think,
That's
as
what I was
well.
gonna say, biology, chemistry of composting.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I would have loved to see some more data, and maybe they had it, we just didn't see it, but around like how it did affect the community. So like how many people benefited from the, food that they were growing and gave to the food bank, or how many people actually started their own gardens, or some data around that. I think I would have loved to see as far as it clearly impacted their school community, but as far as taking it outside of the community.
Great point. Good point. Cool. So should we give them a check?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think so too.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I think that might be, that's the last one. Great. So we'll go back to the presentation. We're at the home stretch here, folks. Home stretch. Thanks for your going there with us. So we're now talking about, we just kind of evaluated. Hopefully you're able to do an evaluation with your students about their own projects. I'd like to just talk for a moment about what could go wrong. I know that's kind of silly, but if we miss critical steps in this process, it's not going to work out so well always, right? Have any of us had projects that kind of flopped for one reason or another?
Well, I know the Ponderosa kids had one, but it's probably not a fair example because it was not their fault. But we had started last year researching about replacing toilets or I shouldn't say replacing, I should say modifying toilets to start with in just staff and office restrooms to put a sink on the top of the toilet so that when you flush the toilet, before the clean water goes into the actual toilet bowl, it would go through like a sink area where you can wash your hands, and then that water goes into the toilet. And so, the kids did research about whether it would work. They went around, took pictures of the kinds of toilets that we had, and went to Home Depot and Lowe's and talked to them and, could this work? And then they had to submit a proposal to O&M at the district, which they did, and answered questions about that. How much water would it save? and thought that this was going to move ahead, only to find out in the end that like our local, the Parker Water and Sanitation District would not allow it because it doesn't meet
hygiene,
whatever the code is. I don't have the specifics of that, but
so that speaks to the stakeholder piece too, right? Like you can do all the research, right? But finding out who makes the decisions on the issue is critical.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
So thinking like the order in which you do these things, you do all this work and find out that this key piece.
And I see them so many places now specifically in restaurants. A lot of restaurants have gone this way, which really surprises me that you wouldn't allow. I mean, I would think that restrictions would be tougher on someplace where you're, the basic thing is eating food as opposed to a school. But anyway, so they kind of had to make the decision. Now do we try to fight to get the the code changed, or do we move on?
How do you kind of support that process of that disappointment that might come from the students?
Right, I know, and it's hard. I mean they were really excited about that. They had sent out a survey to the teachers to see how they felt about it before they went forward, and the teachers were, sounds good to me, but I at least like to try because
I think that she asks a good question though. Yeah. Like I feel like disappointments are a part of life, right?
Exactly.
And working really hard for something and not having it come through happens to all of us.
Right.
And so it kind of seems like a critical lesson for young people in their social emotional development to understand how to process not failure but challenges or standstill, right? Because perhaps, let's say, for example, if they had continued or wanted to continue, an example I compare it to is, Arvada West did this water bottle. Yeah. They tried to eliminate reusable water bottles for a long time, and they got them out of the, they bought everybody a reusable water bottle, and then the school never removed them from the vending machines, and they're like, what the heck? They talked to the principal. Principal said, sorry, it's not my decision. They could have stopped there, right? They could have stopped saying, oh, it's beyond our control. Right. But instead they said, well, whose decision is it? And so then they found out it was the school board. They went to the school board. And instead of just walking in like saying, hey, we got a problem with this, they went and watched how people presented their concerns to the school board. What did they wear? How did they dress? How did they get heard? Who's an advocate for the environment?